The colony at the edge of the mining belt was not a place people chose to live. It was a place where people ended up when they had no other option. The air was always filled with dust from the digging machines, and the sky was never truly clear. The ground shook often as drills cut into stone, searching for minerals that would be sent to richer worlds. For most, life here was about survival, not dreams. One morning, after a heavy quake, a group of miners made a discovery that would change everything. Their machines struck something solid deep inside the caverns. At first, they thought it was another layer of stone, harder than usual. But when the dust cleared, they saw a surface that shone faintly in the dim lights of the tunnels. It was not rock. It was not metal they had ever seen before. It was smooth yet scarred, with strange patterns etched across it. The miners worked carefully to clear away more rubble, and as the shape revealed itself, whispers spread quickly. What they uncovered was enormous. The structure stretched far back into the cavern, wings folded against its body, a tail curling around broken stones, and a head that rested as if in deep sleep. It looked like a dragon out of the oldest legends, but this was no simple beast. Its body was half living matter and half machine, as if forged by hands and grown by nature at the same time. The miners stepped back in fear. None dared touch it again. Some said it was dead, a fossil of some forgotten age. Others swore they saw a faint glow deep in its chest, like an ember refusing to go out. The colony leaders soon came down into the caverns. They studied the giant carefully and ordered guards to keep everyone away. "It is dangerous," they said. "It belongs to an age that was not ours. If it wakes, it could destroy everything we have built." Their voices carried authority, and the people obeyed, though curiosity burned in their hearts. But not all obeyed. Far in the darkness, hidden among the stones, a pair of small eyes watched. The hatchling had been alone for what felt like endless days. Its mother, the great dragon, had fallen silent long ago. The hatchling was small compared to her massive form, no larger than a grown dog, with scales that shimmered faintly like starlight. It pressed itself against the cold ground, afraid of the miners, afraid of the noise, and most of all, afraid of losing the only family it had. When the workers left, the hatchling crept close to its mother. It nudged her chest with its small head, as it always did, hoping for warmth, for a breath, for any sign that she was still there. Sometimes it felt a faint vibration, like a heart struggling to keep beating. But the moments were growing fewer. The hatchling cried softly, a sound that echoed through the cavern like a lonely wind. Days passed. The colony went back to its routine, though talk of the giant never stopped. Some called it a relic. Some called it a weapon. Many wanted it destroyed before it could awaken. The leaders made their decision clear: it is to be sealed away. No one must disturb it. But sealing away something so large was not easy. Workers were assigned to build barriers and set explosives to block the tunnels. Each time they returned, though, they spoke of strange feelings in the cavern. The air seemed heavier, as if the walls themselves were watching. Some claimed to hear faint sounds, like whispers or breathing, though no one admitted it loudly. Fear grew. Through it all, the hatchling remained unseen. It had learned to hide whenever humans came. Yet it was desperate. It had no food but the scraps it could steal from packs left behind. It had no strength to care for its mother. Its heart ached with helplessness. Every night, it cried, small sounds lost in the vastness of the stone halls. One night, when the colony was quiet, the hatchling climbed onto its mother's chest. It lay there, listening. There was no warmth. There was no glow. The hatchling pressed harder, as if trying to wake her with its own body. Its eyes filled with silent tears. For the first time, fear turned into despair. Perhaps the voices of the humans were right. Perhaps she was truly gone. But deep within the dragon, something faint stirred. The hatchling felt it, a weak pulse, like the smallest flicker of fire. Its mother was not gone yet. But the fire was dying, and it could not save her alone. That night, under the endless dark, the hatchling made a choice. It would have to seek help. Not from its own kind, for none remained here. Not from the stars, for it could not fly. Only from the humans, the noisy creatures who lived above. The hatchling feared them, but it also knew they carried tools and knowledge it did not understand. Perhaps one of them could help where the hatchling could not. The colony above remained unaware of this silent decision. People sat in their quarters, sharing stories of the ancient giant that slept beneath their feet. Children asked if it would rise again. Adults told them to hush, saying there were enough problems already. But deep in the cavern, a small life prepared to step into a path no one would expect. The dragon mother lay still, her body broken and heavy, her history hidden in scars no human could yet read. The hatchling pressed one last time against her chest, feeling that faint pulse. Then it turned toward the tunnels that led upward. Its small steps echoed in the stone corridors as it left the only safe place it had ever known, carrying nothing but hope and the will to save its mother. Tomash was known across the colony as a quiet man who preferred machines to people. While others gathered in the mess hall to trade stories or complain about long hours, Tomash usually stayed in his workshop. His small corner of the colony was always filled with spare parts, half-repaired machines, and the constant hum of tools. He was not famous, nor rich, but whenever something broke and no one else could fix it, people came to him. He had a gift. Old engines that had stopped running years ago, mining drills too damaged for use, air filters clogged with dust. Tomash found a way to make them work again. Some called him stubborn, others said he simply had patience no one else had. He did not mind what they thought. For him, fixing machines was more than work. It was a promise that nothing was truly lost until every option had been tried. One evening, after a long day repairing a cracked oxygen pipe, Tomash left his workshop to wander the outer tunnels. He often did this when he needed silence. The colony was always noisy, filled with the sound of drills, footsteps, and voices, but the deeper caverns gave him peace. Most avoided those areas, fearing the strange silence, but Tomash liked the stillness. It reminded him of places untouched by machines. As he walked, his lamp flickered over the rough stone walls. Dust floated in the air, and his boots echoed softly. He followed a path he had not taken before, curious about the tremors that had shaken the colony the previous week. The ground had cracked in places, and rumors said some tunnels had collapsed. Tomash wanted to see for himself. It was in one of those cracks that he first heard the sound. At first it seemed like a faint whistle, as if air was escaping through a hole in the stone. He paused, listening. Then it came again, clearer this time. It was not air. It was a cry. Tomash froze, his heart quickening. The sound was soft but filled with sorrow, like a child calling out in the dark. He followed it, stepping carefully between loose stones, until he reached a narrow opening. He crouched and pushed his lamp forward. The light spilled into a wide chamber he had never seen before. There, against the far wall, sat a small creature unlike anything Tomash had ever imagined. It had scales that glimmered faintly under the lamp, like fragments of stars caught in its skin. Its body was slender, its wings curled close to its sides, and its eyes shone with a strange brightness, wide, fearful, and full of need. The creature looked fragile, as though it had been hiding without food or comfort for a long time. For a moment, Tomash thought he was dreaming. He blinked and rubbed his eyes, but the creature remained, staring back at him. Neither moved. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of the creature's small breaths. Finally, the hatchling let out another cry, soft and trembling. Tomash felt the sound strike something deep in him. It was not a cry of danger. It was not a roar meant to frighten. It was a call for help. Cautiously, Tomash lowered himself into the chamber. He did not move quickly, afraid to scare it away. The hatchling tilted its head but did not retreat. Instead, it stepped back only once, then stopped as if deciding whether to trust him. Tomash knelt on the stone floor, setting his lamp aside. His eyes wandered past the hatchling, and only then did he notice the enormous shape that filled most of the chamber. His breath caught. The great body lay still, wings folded against the ground, a massive head resting in silence. He recognized it at once. This was the same dragon-like giant the colony leaders had warned everyone about. Here it was, close enough to touch, more vast than he had ever imagined. Its scars glowed faintly under the dust, and its frame looked both living and mechanical. The hatchling turned toward the giant and let out another cry. It pressed itself against the still body, as though begging Tomash to understand. And Tomash did understand. He realized then that the creature was not crying for itself. It was crying for its mother. He stood there for a long moment, torn between fear and compassion. The colony leaders had declared this giant dangerous. They wanted it sealed away. Yet here was a small life begging for help, and a mother who seemed more broken than threatening. He stepped closer. Examining the giant, Tomash saw more detail. Wires ran through torn muscle like veins. Plates of metal covered patches of skin, but many were cracked or rusted. Parts of the body were crushed, as if from terrible battles or centuries of weight. He placed a hand gently against the surface. It was cold, yet he felt a faint vibration, weak but steady. The dragon was not dead. The hatchling looked at him with wide eyes, waiting, almost as if asking what he would do next. Tomash pulled back his hand slowly. His mind was racing. The colony leaders would never allow this. They would destroy the creature or bury it forever. But he could not ignore what he had just seen. The mechanic in him stirred. Machines spoke to him in ways others could not hear. This was not just a machine, not just a creature, but something in between. He could see the broken systems, the damaged parts, and he knew that if he had time, he might bring some of them back to life. It would be dangerous, yes, but it was not impossible. Tomash sat on the ground, breathing deeply. The hatchling moved closer, watching him carefully. Then, to his surprise, it carried something small in its mouth, a fragment of metal wire, and placed it at his feet. Tomash picked it up and studied it. It was damaged, but the gesture was clear. The hatchling wanted him to fix what was broken. A quiet bond formed in that moment. Tomash did not speak, but he nodded once. The hatchling let out a soft sound, almost like a sigh of relief, and curled beside him. Tomash stayed in the cavern until his lamp began to dim. As he prepared to leave, the hatchling followed a few steps, then stopped, as if afraid to leave its mother's side. Tomash turned back once, meeting its eyes. He gave another small nod, a promise without words. When he returned to the colony, he carried more than the dust of the caverns. He carried a decision. Others might see only danger in the silent giant, but he had seen life still struggling within it. And he had heard the cry of a hatchling that refused to give up. Tomasz knew then that his days of repairing broken drills and clogged filters were no longer enough. He had found something greater, something that demanded his gift. He would return. He would help. The next day, Tomasz returned to the cavern. He told no one where he was going. He carried a bag filled with tools, spanners, welding rods, small energy cells, and coils of wire. His steps were careful, and his heart beat faster than usual, but his decision was firm. He could not turn away after what he had seen. When he reached the chamber, the hatchling was waiting. It rushed forward the moment his lamp touched the walls, letting out a soft sound that was neither growl nor cry. It was almost like greeting a friend. Tomasz knelt and placed a hand on its head. The scales felt cool and smooth, yet alive with faint warmth beneath. The creature leaned into his touch, then quickly ran back to the great body of its mother, as if to remind him why he was here. Tomasz stood before the giant again. In the light of his lamp, he studied her more carefully. Her chest rose faintly, though unevenly, and every movement seemed like a struggle. The scars across her body were deep. Some looked old, faded by time, while others were raw and cracked, as if she had fallen recently. Broken plates of metal hung loose, exposing living flesh beneath. Wires sparked weakly, flickering like dying stars. The sight filled Tomasz with both awe and sorrow. He whispered to himself, "You are still alive." The mechanic in him took over. He placed his bag down and pulled out a scanner he had built long ago. It was a simple device, used to detect energy flows in machines. Slowly, he passed it over the dragon's side. The readings were unstable. Large parts of her systems were failing, but a faint power core still pulsed deep inside, struggling to keep her alive. "She is not gone," Tomasz murmured. "She just needs time and care." The hatchling stood close, its eyes fixed on him. It seemed to understand every word, or at least every tone. Tomasz began his work. He started with the loose wires that sparked weakly near the dragon's chest. He removed broken pieces and carefully joined the ends together with his welding tool. The spark steadied. The faint glow within her chest grew a little stronger, like a flame catching breath. The hatchling let out a soft cry, circling him with excitement. Tomasz smiled faintly. "Yes. She feels it." Hours passed as he continued. He patched torn circuits with wires from old mining machines. He cleaned rust from the metal plates, applying a thin coat of sealant to slow further decay. He used old energy cells to give small boosts of power to her weak systems. Each small act was nothing compared to the scale of her wounds, but each act mattered. When he paused to rest, he noticed something strange. The air in the chamber felt warmer. The silence seemed less heavy. He placed his ear close to her chest and heard a slow, steady rhythm, weak, but clearer than the day before. Tomasz felt hope rise inside him. He was not repairing just a machine. He was helping life return. But he also knew the danger. If the colony leaders discovered what he was doing, they would stop him at once. They feared this giant, feared what might happen if she rose again. To them, Tomasz was breaking orders. To them, he was risking the safety of everyone. He sat back against the wall, wiping sweat from his face. The hatchling curled beside him, resting its head on his leg. For the first time in years, Tomasz did not feel alone. His mind wandered as he studied the dragon's scars. Who had built her? Or had she been born this way, part flesh, part machine? Was she a soldier in some ancient war? Or a guardian left behind when her people vanished? He had no answers, only questions. Yet the more he worked, the less it mattered. What mattered was that she was alive, and she deserved a chance to heal. The hatchling stirred and nudged him, carrying another broken piece of wire in its mouth. Tomasz laughed softly. You want to help, too. He took the wire and set it aside. Then we will do this together. Day after day, Tomasz returned. Each visit he brought more tools and spare parts. He worked in silence, only the hum of his instruments filling the cavern. The hatchling stayed by his side, sometimes watching, sometimes dozing, sometimes nudging small parts toward him. Slowly, the cavern that had once felt heavy and hopeless began to feel alive again. One evening, after connecting a cluster of damaged circuits, Tomasz felt the ground tremble faintly. He pulled back, alarmed, but then realized what was happening. The dragon's great body shifted slightly. Not much, but enough that dust fell from her wings. The hatchling leapt with joy, circling her mother's head and letting out cries that echoed across the walls. Tomasz placed his hand against the dragon's side. Beneath his palm, he felt warmth spreading, weak but steady. You are waking, he whispered. But his joy was mixed with fear. If she woke fully too soon, before he could stabilize her systems, her own power might destroy what remained of her body. Worse, the colony would notice. Already, rumors had begun to spread. People whispered about a strange light in the lower tunnels, about noises like distant breathing. Tomasz knew it was only a matter of time before the leaders grew suspicious. Yet he could not stop. Each repair he made gave the dragon more strength, and each sign of recovery gave him more determination. He had fixed broken drills, worn out engines, shattered pipes. But this was different. This was not just repair. This was giving back life where everyone else had given up. That night, as he packed his tools, the hatchling pressed close to him. Tomasz looked into its bright eyes and spoke softly. I will not leave her. I promise. As long as I have hands to work, I will keep trying. The hatchling leaned against him, as if understanding his vow. Together, they looked at the great dragon who lay in silence yet stirred with faint signs of return. In that dark cavern, far from the noise of the colony, Tomasz felt a bond stronger than any machine he had ever repaired. He had chosen his path, and there was no turning back. The cavern had grown familiar to Tomasz. It no longer felt like a place of fear, but like a hidden workshop where he carried out his most important work. Every day after finishing his regular duties in the colony, he came back with new tools or scraps of parts. Each night, he worked by the light of his lamp while the hatchling watched with glowing eyes. The dragon mother remained silent, but Tomasz could see the difference in her. Her breaths had grown steadier. The faint glow deep in her chest flickered brighter than before. Her wounds, though still vast, no longer seemed lifeless. The change was slow, but it was real. One evening, Tomasz focused on a large tear across her neck. Wires hung loose, and a faint hum escaped whenever energy tried to pass through. He crouched and examined the damage. The problem was clear: her connections were broken, preventing the flow of power to important systems. This is like repairing the heart of a great engine, Tomasz muttered. He pulled out fresh cables he had taken from old mining equipment and began attaching them one by one. The hatchling crouched close, tilting its head as if trying to understand. When he fused the last connection, a spark ran across the wires. At once, a low vibration filled the cavern, and the dragon's massive body trembled. Dust fell from her wings as they shifted slightly. The hatchling cried out with joy, running in circles around its mother's head. Tomash steadied himself against the wall, heart racing. He had expected progress, but not this quickly. He placed his palm against her side and felt warmth beneath the metal and scales. "You are coming back," he whispered. The hatchling pressed its head against Tomash's shoulder, as though sharing its happiness. He reached out and stroked its smooth scales. "We are doing this together," he said. But with each spark of life, Tomash also felt a growing weight of responsibility. The stronger she became, the greater the risk of being discovered. Already, strange whispers had begun to move through the colony. Some miners claimed they had seen flickers of light deep in the forbidden caverns. Others swore they heard faint rumbles like breathing. The leaders dismissed it as imagination, but Tomash knew the truth. The dragon was stirring, and it could not be hidden forever. Still, he continued. He spent the next days repairing smaller systems, feeding her broken circuits with power from the cells he carried. Each time he gave her energy, the cavern seemed to brighten faintly, as if her presence filled the space. The hatchling grew braver as well. No longer hiding when Tomash approached, it now brought him objects from the shadows, scraps of metal, stones, or even bones from creatures long dead. Tomash accepted each gift with a smile, though many were useless. What mattered was the trust between them. One night, while he worked, Tomash paused and listened. A sound reached his ears, so faint he thought he imagined it. It was not the cry of the hatchling or the hum of wires. It was a low, deep resonance that seemed to come from the giant herself. He leaned closer. The sound grew clearer. It was not words, but it carried meaning, a voice struggling to return. His breath caught. She was trying to speak. The hatchling pressed close to its mother's face, crying softly. Tomash placed his hand against the dragon's head. "Not yet," he whispered. "You need more time. Rest." "I will not stop." As he worked, he thought about what he had already done. He was no doctor, no scientist from great academies. He was a mechanic from a forgotten colony, a man who fixed broken drills and pipes. Yet here he was, helping something ancient and powerful breathe again. The thought humbled him. The following days tested him. Supplies grew harder to find. He had already taken most of the spare parts he could without notice. To gather more, he had to dismantle old machines in secret. If the leaders learned he was removing pieces, suspicion would rise. Tomash kept his head low, working harder at his daily repairs to keep attention away. At night, when he was free, he returned to the cavern with whatever he had hidden in his bag. Despite the struggle, progress showed. The dragon's great eyes, once dull and lifeless, began to flicker faintly when he worked near her head. The first time it happened, Tomash nearly dropped his tool in shock. The hatchling cried out in excitement, nuzzling against its mother. Tomash simply stood frozen, staring at the faint glow returning to her gaze. "You can see again," he whispered. His voice shook with awe. The hatchling climbed onto the dragon's chest, pressing close to her as if to share the joy. Tomash watched them, feeling a warmth in his chest he had not felt for many years. This was more than repair. This was life returning, hope rising where there had once been only silence. But the joy was shadowed by fear. The colony was restless. Rumors had reached the ears of the leaders. Patrols were sent deeper into the tunnels, though none yet found Tamash's hidden chamber. He knew it was only a matter of time. That night, as he prepared to leave, he knelt beside the hatchling. Its eyes shone with trust. "Listen," he said softly. "They will not understand. They will be afraid. But I promise you, I will not let them take her away. I will fight for her, even if I stand alone." The hatchling let out a soft sound, almost like agreement. It curled beside him as if to say he was not alone. Tamash rose and looked one last time at the great dragon. Her chest rose with steadier rhythm. Her glow flickered stronger than before. Sparks of life had returned to her, sparks he had helped restore. For the first time since he had discovered her, Tamash allowed himself to believe in what could come. Perhaps she would rise again. Perhaps she would speak. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would prove that not all ancient powers were meant to be feared. The cavern fell silent once more, but it was no longer the silence of death. It was the silence of waiting, the silence before a storm of life. The colony above had always been filled with whispers, but now the whispers had turned into loud talk. People spoke openly in the mess hall, in the corridors, and even while working in the mines. Something was stirring in the lower caverns. Some said they had seen lights flashing where no lamp had been. Others claimed they had heard rumbling sounds like breathing. A few swore they had even felt warmth in tunnels that were usually cold. The leaders grew uneasy. The colony depended on order, and fear spread faster than truth. If the people believed danger was rising, chaos could follow. So the leaders called a meeting and stood before the crowd in the central hall. "The ancient creature below is not a treasure," one of them said. "It is a threat. It is wounded, yes, but if it wakes, it may destroy us. We will not allow that to happen." Murmurs spread among the people. Some nodded in agreement, while others remained silent, uncertain. Tamash listened from the edge of the hall, his hands clenched into fists. He knew they were wrong. He had seen the truth with his own eyes. The dragon was not a threat but a wounded being, clinging to life. The hatchling was proof of that. A creature filled with trust and hope could not come from something evil. But he could not speak these thoughts aloud. To do so would expose what he had been doing. The leaders announced that they would send a group of miners to seal the lower caverns once and for all. Explosives would collapse the entrances, and no one would ever enter again. Tamash's heart sank. If they carried out their plan, the dragon and her hatchling would be buried forever. All his work, all the sparks of life he had brought back, would be lost. He left the hall quietly, his mind racing. He had to act quickly. That evening, he returned to the cavern with more urgency than ever. The hatchling greeted him as always, but it sensed his unease. It tilted its head, letting out a questioning cry. Tamash knelt beside it. "They want to bury this place," he said softly. "They think your mother is dangerous. But they do not know her like we do." The hatchling pressed against him, as though asking what they would do. Tamash set his tools down and worked with renewed focus. He reinforced the repairs he had already made, checking each connection twice. He gave the dragon another burst of power from a spare cell, watching as her glow brightened a little more. She stirred faintly, her wings shifting slightly against the stone. "You must wake soon," he whispered. "You must show them who you really are. Otherwise, they will not listen." The hatchling cried softly, curling against its mother's side. Days passed, and the colony prepared the explosives. Miners gathered supplies, and guards were assigned to the tunnels. The leaders ordered strict patrols, ensuring no one entered the forbidden areas. Yet Tomasz found ways to slip past them. He used old shafts and forgotten cracks in the stone. He had spent years learning the colony's hidden paths, and now they served him well. But the risk grew. One night, as he returned from the cavern, he nearly ran into two guards patrolling a side tunnel. He hid behind broken rocks, holding his breath as their lamps swept across the walls. One of the guards muttered, "Strange noises again. I swear I heard something moving." "Maybe it is the wind," the other replied. "No. It was deeper, like a groan. I don't like this place. We should finish the job and collapse it." Their voices faded as they walked away, but Tomasz remained still for a long moment. When he finally slipped back to his quarters, his heart pounded with both fear and anger. He knew now that he was running out of time. The next day, while repairing a small oxygen pump for the colony, Tomasz overheard a group of miners. They were angry, speaking with harsh voices. "That thing should be destroyed before it destroys us. I heard it moved. Someone saw its eyes glow. If the leaders do not act soon, we will." Tomasz clenched his jaw. These were not just rumors anymore. Fear had turned into hatred. If the miners tried to destroy the dragon themselves, they could harm not only her but also the hatchling. He could not allow it. That evening, when he returned to the cavern, he sat beside the hatchling, who pressed close to him as if sensing his troubled thoughts. Tomasz spoke aloud, though his voice trembled. "They do not understand. They only see danger where I see life. But I will not let them hurt you. I will not let them bury her." The hatchling looked up at him, eyes glowing with trust. Tomasz placed his hand on the dragon's great chest. Her breathing was steadier now. The warmth beneath her metal and scales was stronger. He knew she was close to waking, but not yet ready. He needed more time, more parts, more energy. The problem was that time was running out. The leaders had announced that the sealing of the tunnels would begin in 3 days. 3 days to finish what he had started. 3 days to save a life no one else believed was worth saving. Tomasz worked harder than ever. He barely slept, barely ate. Every hour he was not in the colony fixing broken machines, he was in the cavern repairing the dragon. The hatchling stayed with him always, carrying small parts, watching with wide eyes, and sometimes curling against him when he grew too tired to stand. One night, while connecting another cluster of wires, Tomasz felt a sudden surge of energy. The cavern trembled, and the dragon's great eyes flickered open for the briefest moment. They glowed with deep light, ancient and powerful, before closing again. Tomasz staggered back in shock, his chest tight with awe. He looked at the hatchling, who cried out with joy and pressed close to its mother. Tomasz whispered, "She is waking. She truly is waking." But even as hope filled him, the sound of distant footsteps echoed through the tunnel. Voices carried faintly, closer than they had ever been. The leaders were sending patrols deeper now. The cavern was no longer safe. Tomasz tightened his grip on his tools and looked at the hatchling. "We must be careful. If they find us, it will all be over." The hatchling pressed against him, as if sharing his resolve. The days ahead would test him more than ever. But Tomasz had made his choice long ago. He would not stop. Not for fear, not for threats, not even for the whole colony standing against him. For he knew the truth in his heart. The dragon was not a monster. She was a mother, a protector, and she deserved to live. The next morning, the cavern was quiet, but the air carried a weight of expectation. Tomasz returned early, carrying his tools and a small collection of energy cells. The hatchling greeted him immediately, its bright eyes reflecting both excitement and worry. Tomasz knelt and gently stroked its head. "Today, we finish what we started," he whispered. He approached the dragon, whose massive body lay still but alive. Over the past days, her energy had returned in small flickers, enough to make her chest rise steadily and for faint warmth to spread through her metal and scales. Tomasz could see the subtle shifts in her muscles, the twitching of her wings, and the faint movement of her tail. Every sign gave him hope, yet also a sense of urgency. The colony leaders were preparing to seal the tunnels, and every moment mattered. Tomasz knelt and began connecting the final circuits he had prepared. Each wire he attached hummed faintly with energy. Sparks of light ran across the dragon's frame, brighter than ever before. The hatchling pressed close to her mother, nudging her gently as if to encourage her to awaken. The dragon's eyes opened slowly. At first, only a small sliver of light appeared in the dark sockets. Then they widened, glowing steadily with a warm, deep light. Tomasz felt his heart leap. He had never seen anything so powerful, so ancient, and yet so alive. The hatchling cried out with joy and leapt onto her mother's chest. She stirred in response, lifting her great head with effort. Her gaze fell upon Tomasz, and for the first time, he felt a connection beyond words. He placed a trembling hand against her metallic scales, feeling energy, life, and intelligence all in one. "She remembers," Tomasz whispered. The dragon let out a low, resonant sound that echoed through the cavern. It was not a roar of anger, but a vibration that filled the air with presence. Tomasz realized she was communicating not with words, but with a deep awareness that reached his mind and heart. The hatchling pressed closer, chirping softly as if explaining to her mother what Tomasz had done. The dragon shifted her massive wings and tail, her movements cautious but deliberate. Every action showed both her strength and her care. She had not forgotten her own power, nor had she forgotten the bond with her hatchling. Tomasz stepped back slightly, awe-filling him. He had repaired her body, but what he now witnessed was the awakening of her mind, her soul, and her spirit. She was no longer a silent giant. She was alive, aware, and present. For a long moment, the cavern was filled with quiet energy. Tomasz felt the weight of history pressing around them. He thought of the wars she might have fought, the worlds she had protected, the battles that had left her broken. And yet, here she was, given life again by human hands. Suddenly, the hatchling turned toward Tomasz, chirping urgently. The dragon followed its gaze. She tilted her head and pressed her snout toward Tomasz. It was an unspoken acknowledgement of gratitude, a recognition of the life he had restored. Tomasz felt tears prick his eyes, though he did not move them. This was more than success. This was a bond between species, a connection born of trust, patience, and care. The dragon tested her wings slowly, stretching them with care. The hatchling squealed with delight, running along the edge of her massive frame. Tomasz watched as her movements became more confident, more purposeful. She lifted herself partially, then lowered back to the ground, cautious but learning to balance her strength with her own fragility. "Stay calm," Tomasz said softly. "You are safe. No one will harm you here." The dragon responded with another low vibration, a sound that felt like understanding. Tomasz realized that she could sense his intentions, his honesty, and his care. Unlike the colony leaders, he had approached her not with fear, but with respect and compassion. And she understood that completely. Time passed. The cavern seemed to glow faintly under the soft lights of Tamash's lamps and the growing glow from the dragon herself. The hatchling nestled against her mother, content to watch her movements. Tamash worked quietly at stabilizing the remaining energy circuits, ensuring that the dragon's systems could sustain the flow without risk of overload. The quiet was broken by distant noise, the faint sounds of the colony above. Tamash froze. Footsteps and voices echoed through the tunnels, growing louder. The patrols were nearing the entrance. He knew they would soon discover the activity in the cavern. He looked at the dragon. Her eyes followed him. In that moment, he understood that she trusted him to protect her. And he knew he had to act. Tamash whispered to the hatchling, "Get ready. We may have to move quickly." The hatchling chirped and pressed close to him, ready to follow his lead. The patrols entered the outer tunnels, but Tamash had prepared. Using a hidden shaft he had discovered earlier, he led the hatchling and herself deeper into the cavern system. She moved slowly at first, testing her strength, then faster as confidence returned. Tamash guided them carefully, ensuring they avoided the main tunnels and patrols. As they reached a wider chamber, the dragon finally rose fully. Her massive wings spread, and her body towered with grace and power. Tamash stood beside the hatchling, feeling the energy radiating from her frame. This was a creature of legend, of ancient history, now reborn through human hands and care. The hatchling chirped loudly, running in circles. The dragon lowered her head and nuzzled it gently. Tamash smiled. The bond between mother and child, combined with the trust in him, had created something extraordinary. For the first time, Tamash felt that all the danger, all the risk, had been worth it. The dragon could move. She could breathe fully. She was awake. He realized, too, that this awakening was more than physical. She carried wisdom from ages past. Tamash felt a deep respect for her knowledge and power. It was clear she could communicate in ways he could not yet understand, yet the trust she placed in him was enough. The hatchling ran to Tamash and pressed against him. He stroked its scales and whispered, "We did it. She is alive, and she is safe, for now." Above, the colony remained unaware of what had truly happened. Below, in the depths of the ancient cavern, a mother dragon had returned to life. Her hatchling was at her side, and a human mechanic had earned their trust forever. The cavern no longer felt silent. It was alive with movement, warmth, and the faint hum of energy. Sparks of life had returned, not just to the dragon, but to the small, hidden world in which Tamash had risked everything. He looked at the dragon one last time that night, whispering, "Rest now. We have more work ahead, but for tonight, you are awake." The dragon's eyes glowed softly, and she lowered herself to rest, her hatchling curling close. Tamash sat beside them, exhausted but filled with a sense of accomplishment he had never known. The awakening was complete. The morning light filtered through the cracks of the cavern, illuminating the vast chamber where the dragon had fully awakened. Her great body stretched and shifted, each movement filled with grace and power. The hatchling was perched on a rock nearby, eyes bright and full of joy. Tamash stood beside them, weary but proud, knowing he had helped restore a life that many had believed lost forever. Outside, the colony was in chaos. Rumors of strange lights, sounds, and vibrations had reached every corner. The leaders had sent patrols again, this time with more urgency. They demanded answers, fearing that some unknown threat had emerged from the depths. No one knew what awaited them, only that something powerful had stirred. Tamash knew it was time. The dragon, now awake and strong enough to move, had to show herself. He approached her, speaking softly. It is time to let them see the truth. They must understand you are not a threat, but a being of life and wisdom. The dragon lowered her massive head and let out a deep, resonant sound that filled the cavern. It was not a roar of anger, but a sound that carried calm, intelligence, and authority. The hatchling cried out, echoing the sound, and Tomash felt a shiver of awe. The cavern seemed to vibrate with energy as if the walls themselves acknowledged her presence. When Tomash led her to the entrance of the cavern, the patrols froze in shock. The dragon's massive frame towered over them, her scales shimmering faintly, her eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. The hatchling ran forward and chirped loudly, drawing attention to the bond between mother and child. "Step back," one of the leaders shouted, raising his hand. It could attack. Tomash stepped forward, holding his arms out. "She will not harm you. She is alive because I chose to help her. And she trusts me, and now, she will trust you too if you let her show you." The dragon tilted her head and looked at the humans. Her gaze was deep, calm, and filled with understanding. She lowered herself slightly, making no sudden movements. She exuded a presence that demanded respect rather than fear. The hatchling ran along her side, chirping happily, showing the humans that she was gentle and caring. The leader hesitated, then slowly signaled the patrols to stand down. Others in the colony began to gather at a safe distance, curious but fearful. Tomash stayed by the hatchling's side, his hand on its head, silently encouraging the humans to look beyond fear. As moments passed, the initial shock faded. Some colonists whispered in awe, while others simply stared, unable to speak. The dragon lowered her wings, stretched her tail carefully, and finally let out a low sound that resonated in every heart present. It was a sound of greeting, of peace, and of life. Tomash smiled. "She is not a weapon," he said softly. "She is a guardian, a mother, and she is alive because we chose life over fear." The leader stepped closer, his eyes wide. She can think?" he asked, voice trembling. Tomash nodded. "She can feel, she can understand, and she can remember. Her kind once protected worlds. She is not here to harm us, only to exist, and perhaps to teach us something we have forgotten." The dragon made a low sound again, and Tomash felt it reach his mind as much as his ears. It was not words, but he understood it perfectly. She was grateful, aware, and willing to share her presence without conflict. The hatchling chirped happily and ran between Tomash's legs and the dragon's massive frame. Colonists began to realize the bond between them, and slowly, fear turned into understanding. The dragon was alive, yes, but she was gentle and intelligent. She had been misunderstood, as had her hatchling. The leader took a deep breath. "We judged too quickly," he admitted. "We feared what we did not understand. Perhaps we have something to learn from her." Tomash felt relief wash over him. The dragon stirred beside him, acknowledging the words, and her glow brightened slightly. The hatchling chirped, pressing against Tomash as if to say that trust and compassion had won. The colony slowly began to change its perspective. People approached cautiously, offering gestures of peace and respect. Children ran forward with curiosity rather than fear, and even some of the miners who had once shouted for her destruction now stood in awe, watching the great dragon and her hatchling move gracefully among them. Tomash realized then that humanity's strength was not just in machines, weapons, or technology. It was in compassion, the ability to choose life and trust even when fear demanded otherwise. He had repaired broken wires and circuits, yes, but more importantly, he had restored faith in the possibility of understanding across species. The dragon moved fully into the open, her massive wings folding gracefully against her sides. She lifted her head high, as if showing the colony that she had returned not for battle, but to be acknowledged, respected, and understood. Her hatchling chirped proudly, running along her tail and showing the humans the joy of life renewed. Tomash stepped back and watched the scene. He had been a simple mechanic, someone no one had noticed in the busy colony. But his choice to act with courage and care had changed the course of events. He realized that even small actions, driven by respect and understanding, could create extraordinary outcomes. The colony leaders finally approached Tomash, their faces filled with a mix of fear and awe. "You saved her," one said quietly. "You saw what we could not. We owe her and you our respect." Tomash nodded humbly. "She is alive because she deserved to be. And she will remain safe as long as we choose to see her as she is." The dragon looked down at Tomash, then at the humans surrounding the cavern. Her eyes shone with deep understanding. She lowered her head slightly, acknowledging both him and the colony. She did not threaten, she did not demand, she simply existed as a reminder that life, when respected, could overcome fear. The hatchling chirped once more and ran to Tomash. He knelt and stroked its smooth scales. "We did it," he whispered. "We gave her a second chance." The colony had witnessed something extraordinary. A mother dragon, ancient and powerful, had returned to life. Her hatchling thrived by her side, and a human mechanic had bridged the gap between worlds, showing that compassion and courage could change the fate of both species. In the days that followed, the colony adapted. Patrols were reduced, and restrictions on the lower caverns were lifted. People began to bring supplies and food to the dragon and her hatchling. Tomash continued to work with them, repairing small systems and ensuring her comfort. The bond between humans and dragons had begun, and a new chapter of coexistence and understanding was born. Tomash looked at the dragon and hatchling one evening as the sun set over the colony. The light reflected off their scales and metal, making them appear even more magnificent. He realized that humanity's greatest strength was not in power or fear, but in choice, the choice to protect, to care, and to believe in life even when others did not. The dragon shifted slightly, nuzzling the hatchling. Tomash smiled. He had never imagined that his skills as a mechanic would lead to something so extraordinary. And yet, here they were, life restored, trust earned, and hope alive. The colony had learned something important. The ancient guardian had returned not to destroy, but to remind them that compassion and understanding were stronger than fear. And the humans who had chosen to act with care had found their place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as stewards of life. The dragon and her hatchling rested together, calm and serene, while Tomash stood nearby, watching over them. He knew that this was only the beginning of a long journey. The bond between humans and dragons would grow stronger, and the lessons of trust, patience, and compassion would shape the future of the colony.